Boy saves a small calf and raises it as a friend. Years later, the calf repays the favor in an incredible way. The soft whistle of wind through the Montana plains carried stories of simpler times, where crickets composed evening symphonies and rustling leaves danced to nature's rhythm. In Willow Creek, a town seemingly forgotten by time's relentless march forward, lived a boy named Ethan Morrison. His eyes sparkled with an innate curiosity that set him apart from other children his age. But it was his extraordinary connection with animals that truly made him special. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Let us know which city you're watching us from. Stay tuned. Ethan spent his afternoons exploring the vast expanse of land surrounding his family's modest farm, always in search of new adventures. His parents often watched from their weathered porch as their son disappeared into the golden fields, returning home with tales of discovered treasures and animal encounters that seemed almost magical in nature. The summer of his 13th year brought changes that would alter the course of his life forever. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched Montana earth that day, as Ethan followed the meandering creek that marked the boundary between his family's property and the sprawling McPherson Ranch. The air was thick with the scent of wild sage and sun-baked grass when an unusual sound caught his attention, a weak, desperate cry that seemed to pull at his very soul. Following the sound, Ethan discovered a young calf tangled in the barbed wire fence. The poor creature's eyes were wide with fear, its struggles growing weaker by the moment. Without hesitation, Ethan approached carefully, speaking in soft, soothing tones that seemed to calm the animal instantly. His gentle hands worked methodically to free the calf from its metal prison, careful not to cause any further harm. As the last wire gave way, the calf stumbled free, but instead of running away, it stayed close to Ethan. There was something different about this animal, something in its eyes that spoke of intelligence and gratitude that transcended ordinary animal behavior. Ethan named him Guardian, though he couldn't explain why. The name simply felt right, as if whispered to him by the wind itself. From that day forward, Guardian and Ethan became inseparable. The calf followed him everywhere, displaying an unusual level of understanding and loyalty. They spent countless hours together in the fields, with Ethan sharing his dreams and fears, while Guardian listened with an almost human-like attention. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, becoming the talk of Willow Creek. Word of Ethan's extraordinary connection with Guardian spread through the small community. Neighbors would stop by just to witness the unusual friendship between the boy and the calf. Some dismissed it as childhood fancy, but others saw something deeper, something that hinted at the ancient connection between humans and animals that modern life had all but forgotten. The McPherson family, owners of the largest ranch in the area, took particular interest in Guardian. Old man McPherson himself would often stand at his fence line, watching thoughtfully as Ethan and Guardian played in the adjacent fields. There was something in his weathered face that suggested he knew more than he let on, a secret understanding that would only reveal itself years later. However, life in rural Montana was never easy, and the Morrison family faced mounting challenges. The drought that year had been particularly harsh, and crops withered in the unforgiving sun. Bills piled up on the kitchen table, each one a reminder of the harsh realities that threatened their way of life. Ethan noticed the worried looks his parents exchanged when they thought he wasn't watching, the hushed conversations that stopped whenever he entered the room. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Ethan's father sat him down for a conversation that would change everything. The family's financial situation had become untenable, and difficult decisions had to be made. The McPhersons had offered to buy Guardian, integrating him into their prize-winning herd. The money would help the Morrisons keep their farm, but the cost to Ethan's heart seemed unbearable. The day Guardian was led away to the McPherson ranch was etched into Ethan's memory with painful clarity. The young calf seemed to understand what was happening, its eyes meeting Ethan's with a depth of emotion that defied explanation. As Guardian disappeared behind the McPherson's gate, Ethan made a silent promise. This wouldn't be the end of their story. Little did Ethan know that this separation was just the beginning of a much larger tale, one that would unfold over years and reveal secrets that lay buried beneath the peaceful surface of Willow Creek. Guardian's role in his life was far from over, and the bond they shared would prove to be more significant than anyone could have imagined. Years passed, like pages turning in the wind, and Willow Creek grew smaller in Ethan's rearview mirror as he drove towards Billings, Montana's largest city. The wide streets and towering buildings were a far cry from the open plains of his childhood, but opportunity beckoned. At 25, Ethan had traded his worn boots for polished shoes, and his daily companion was now a sleek laptop instead of a gentle bull named Guardian. Life in Billings offered everything a young professional could want: a steady job at a prestigious agricultural consulting firm, a modern apartment overlooking the city skyline, and the promise of advancement. Yet, something felt missing. During quiet moments between meetings and deadlines, Ethan's mind would drift back to those sun-drenched afternoons in Willow Creek, when life moved at the pace of cricket songs and the only approval he sought was in Guardian's understanding eyes. His colleagues at Montgomery Agricultural Solutions found Ethan's insight into farming communities invaluable. His intimate knowledge of rural life and animal behavior gave him an edge in developing sustainable farming practices. But few knew about the special connection he once shared with a remarkable bull, a story he kept close to his heart like a treasured photograph. The turning point came during a particularly challenging week. Ethan had been working on a massive project to modernize several farms in the region, but something felt off about the conventional approaches his firm was pushing. In his dreams, he kept seeing Guardian's eyes, wise and knowing, as if trying to tell him something important about the natural rhythm of things that technology couldn't replicate. One morning, after another restless night, Ethan stood at his office window watching the city wake up. The sun rising over Billings's skyline was beautiful in its way, but it couldn't compare to the golden light that once bathed the fields of Willow Creek. His phone buzzed with a message, his mother sharing news from home. Strange things were happening at the McPherson ranch, she wrote. Tools disappearing, unexplained disturbances, and at the center of it all was Guardian, now a magnificent bull whose behavior had become the talk of the town. The message stirred something deep within Ethan. Memories flooded back, not just of Guardian, but of the entire tapestry of his childhood. The way the grass swayed in the evening breeze, the smell of rain on dusty fields, the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance. These weren't just memories, they were calling him home. That evening, as Ethan sat in his modern apartment surrounded by the trappings of urban success, he made a decision. He needed to return to Willow Creek, if only for a short visit. Something about the strange events at the McPherson ranch tugged at his consciousness, like a thread waiting to be pulled. His connection with Guardian had always been unique. Perhaps there was more to those stories than simple small-town gossip. The next morning, Ethan surprised his colleagues by requesting a week's vacation. His boss, understanding the importance of maintaining connections with rural communities, readily agreed. As Ethan packed a small bag, he found himself including his old work boots tucked away in the back of his closet. Something told him he might need them. The drive back to Willow Creek felt like traveling through time. With each mile marker that passed, the landscape grew more familiar, more real somehow. The endless Montana sky opened up above him, and the distant mountains stood like ancient guardians of the land. His pressed suits and corporate responsibilities felt increasingly out of place as he drew closer to home. Willow Creek appeared on the horizon exactly as he remembered it, a collection of weathered buildings and dreams nestled among the rolling plains. The town seemed frozen in time, but Ethan could feel a current of tension running beneath its peaceful surface. As he drove down Main Street, he noticed clusters of people engaged in hushed conversations, their eyes following his car with curious interest. Pulling into his parents' driveway, Ethan felt the weight of years falling away. The old farmhouse stood proud against the afternoon sky, its paint a little more faded, its porch a little more worn, but still home. His mother's flower garden still bloomed with stubborn determination, and his father's truck still sat in its familiar spot, covered in the honest dust of farm work. But it was the sound carrying across the fields that really caught his attention, a deep, resonant bellow that could only come from one animal. Guardian was close, and something in that sound spoke of urgency, of secrets waiting to be uncovered. As Ethan stepped out of his car, the wind carried whispers of the McPherson Ranch's mysteries, and he knew his return to Willow Creek would be anything but a simple visit home. The morning after his arrival, Ethan woke to the familiar sounds of rural life, roosters announcing the dawn, tractors rumbling in distant fields, and the gentle symphony of wind through prairie grass. But there was something else in the air, an undercurrent of tension that seemed to pulse through the community like a hidden heartbeat. Over breakfast, his mother filled him in on the recent happenings at the McPherson Ranch. "It started about 3 months ago," she explained, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "First, it was just little things, tools moving from where they'd been left, gates found open when they'd been locked the night before. But then stranger things began happening." She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "The oddest part is Guardian's behavior. That bull seems to know something the rest of us don't." Ethan listened intently as she described how Guardian had been seen patrolling specific areas of the ranch at night, particularly around the old northern pasture. The massive bull would stand for hours, watching, waiting. Some of the ranch hands had even refused to work in that area after sunset, claiming they felt watched by unseen eyes. After breakfast, Ethan decided to visit the McPherson Ranch. As he drove up the winding dirt road, memories flooded back. Summer days spent helping with the harvest, the smell of fresh-cut hay, and most of all, his time with Guardian. The ranch looked much the same as he remembered. The weathered red barn standing proud against the Montana sky, the endless wooden fences stretching toward the horizon, and the old farmhouse that had seen generations of McPhersons come and go. Old man McPherson himself was waiting on the porch, as if he'd been expecting Ethan. Time had added more silver to his hair, but his eyes remained sharp as ever. "Figured you'd show up sooner or later," he said, extending a weathered hand. "That bull of yours has been acting mighty peculiar lately. Reckon he's been waiting for you, too." As they walked the property, McPherson shared more details about the strange occurrences. Tools would vanish only to reappear days later in completely different locations. Mysterious tracks appeared in the morning dew, leading nowhere. But most intriguing were the stories about Guardian. The bull had grown massive over the years, yet maintained an unusual gentleness with the ranch hands he knew and trusted. However, there had been incidents where strangers approaching certain areas of the ranch at night found themselves confronted by the imposing animal, forced to retreat. They reached the northern pasture, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. There, standing like a sentinel beneath an old oak tree, was Guardian. The years had transformed the once small calf into a magnificent creature, but those eyes, those knowing eyes, remained the same. The bull's head lifted at their approach, and a low, rumbling sound emerged from his throat. Without hesitation, Ethan climbed over the fence. McPherson started to protest, but fell silent as he watched Guardian's reaction. The massive bull approached Ethan slowly, deliberately, until they stood face to face. Time seemed to stop as boy and bull reunited, their connection apparently undiminished. by the years apart. Guardian pressed his forehead against Ethan's chest, a gesture so familiar it brought tears to his eyes. "Well, I'll be damned," McPherson whispered. "In all my years..." But Ethan was only half listening. Something in Guardian's behavior caught his attention. The bull kept turning his head toward a particular spot near the old oak tree, then back to Ethan, as if trying to communicate something. Following Guardian's gaze, Ethan noticed subtle irregularities in the ground, areas where the grass grew slightly different, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pasture, Ethan felt a growing certainty that he was meant to be here. The mysteries of the McPherson Ranch weren't random occurrences. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that somehow involved both him and Guardian. The bull's presence beside him felt like more than just a reunion with an old friend. It felt like the beginning of something significant. McPherson watched their interaction with keen interest. "You know," he said finally, "there's been talk about an old underground storage space somewhere on this property. Built during harder times, they say. Never found it myself, but lately..." He paused, glancing at Guardian. "Lately, I've been wondering if maybe some secrets are meant to stay buried until the right time comes to uncover them." As they walked back to the farmhouse, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Guardian's behavior, the mysterious disturbances, the rumors of hidden structures, it all seemed connected, but how? The wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying echoes of untold stories, and Ethan knew his journey back to Willow Creek was about to become much more than a simple visit home. That evening, as twilight painted the Montana sky in deep purples and fading golds, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Guardian had been trying to tell him something. After dinner with his parents, he returned to the McPherson Ranch, armed with a flashlight and his old work boots. McPherson had given him permission to explore the property, curious himself about what might be discovered. The northern pasture looked different in the gathering darkness. Guardian emerged from the shadows like a ghost, his white patches glowing softly in the moonlight. The bull's presence was reassuring as Ethan began examining the area around the old oak tree more carefully. The massive animal stayed close, occasionally nudging Ethan in particular directions, as if guiding him. The night air was cool and still when Ethan first heard it, a hollow sound beneath his feet as he walked. He swept his flashlight beam across the ground, noting how the grass pattern changed subtly in a roughly rectangular shape. Guardian stood nearby, watching intently as Ethan knelt to examine the soil more closely. Using a small hand trowel he'd borrowed from the barn, Ethan began carefully removing the top layer of earth. About 2 feet down, his tool struck something solid. His heart racing, he cleared away more soil, revealing what appeared to be an old wooden chest, its metal fittings corroded by time, but still intact. Guardian moved closer, his warm breath visible in the cool night air, as Ethan worked to free the chest from its earthen prison. When he finally lifted it from the ground, he was surprised by its weight and solid construction. This was no ordinary storage box. It had been built to last, to protect whatever secrets it contained. The lock, though aged, gave way with careful manipulation. Inside, protected by oilcloth wrappings, Ethan found a collection of documents and what appeared to be a detailed map of the McPherson Ranch. But these weren't ordinary farm papers. The documents, dating back several decades, told a story of survival and community spirit during one of Montana's hardest periods. Among the papers was a journal, its pages filled with neat handwriting that detailed the construction of an underground storage facility. During the Dust Bowl era, when crops failed and banks collapsed, the people of Willow Creek had come together to create a hidden cache of supplies and equipment. The storage space was built beneath the McPherson Ranch, chosen for its central location and the trustworthy nature of the family. The map showed the exact location of the underground facility, marked with careful measurements and references to natural landmarks. According to the journal, the space had been used to store not just farming equipment, but also seeds, preserved food, and documents detailing traditional farming methods that had helped the community survive through previous hardships. As Ethan read through the papers by flashlight, Guardian stood watch, his massive form silhouetted against the starlit sky. The bull's behavior suddenly made more sense. He hadn't just been protecting random areas of the ranch. He had been guarding this historical cache of community knowledge and resources. With trembling hands, Ethan traced the location marked on the map. The main entrance to the underground storage was supposedly hidden near the base of a hill, not far from where he'd found the chest. The journal mentioned a series of markers that would guide the way. Specific trees planted in a pattern, rocks arranged in particular formations, all designed to be recognizable only to those who knew what to look for. Guardian's restlessness drew Ethan's attention. The bull was moving toward the hill, stopping occasionally to look back, clearly wanting Ethan to follow. As they walked together through the darkness, Ethan began noticing the markers described in the journal, subtle signs that had been hiding in plain sight all these years. Near the base of the hill, partially hidden by decades of natural growth, Ethan discovered what appeared to be the outline of a door set into the earthen bank. His flashlight beam revealed heavy timber framing beneath the overgrowth, still solid despite the years. This had to be the entrance to the underground storage facility. The discovery filled Ethan with a mix of excitement and responsibility. He knew he needed to share this with McPherson, but something told him there was more to uncover. The recent disturbances at the ranch, Guardian's protective behavior, it all suggested that perhaps others had already discovered these secrets and had their own plans for whatever lay hidden beneath the Montana soil. Looking at Guardian's steadfast form in the moonlight, Ethan realized that his connection with the bull wasn't just about friendship anymore. They were now guardians of something larger, a piece of Willow Creek's history that had been preserved through decades of silence, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. Dawn was breaking over Willow Creek when Ethan finally shared his discovery with McPherson. The old rancher's weathered face showed a mix of amazement and understanding as he examined the documents and map from the chest. His fingers traced the yellowed pages with reverence, as if touching a sacred text. "My grandfather used to tell stories," McPherson said, his voice thick with emotion. "Tales about how the community came together during the hardest times. I always thought they were just that, stories." He looked up at Ethan, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "But this proves they were so much more." They gathered a small team of trusted ranch hands and made their way to the hidden entrance Ethan had found the night before. Guardian followed, maintaining his vigilant watch as they cleared away decades of overgrowth. The heavy wooden door, reinforced with metal bands, had been built to last generations. It took several hours of careful work to clear the entrance completely. When they finally managed to open the door, the air that escaped was cool and surprisingly fresh, suggesting some kind of natural ventilation system. McPherson insisted on being the first to enter, followed closely by Ethan. Their flashlight beams revealed a marvel of rural engineering. The underground space was far larger than anyone had expected, with multiple chambers branching off from a main corridor. The walls and ceiling were reinforced with thick timber supports, many still solid despite their age. Tools hung from hooks, their metal surfaces dulled by time, but still recognizable. In the largest chamber, they found rows of shelves filled with preserved documents, seed collections sealed in glass jars, and farming implements that told the story of agricultural evolution in Montana. But it was the wall of photographs that caught everyone's attention. Faded black and white images showed families working together, building this very space, their faces determined despite the hardships they faced. McPherson recognized many of the people in the photos. "That's my grandfather," he said, pointing to a tall man directing construction. "And there's old Bill Thompson's father, and the Hendersons." His voice trailed off as he realized the significance of what they were seeing. This wasn't just a storage space. It was a testament to the resilience of Willow Creek's community. As they explored further, they found evidence that others had indeed been here recently. Fresh footprints in the dust led to areas where items appeared to have been disturbed. In one corner, they discovered modern tools that didn't belong, evidence of the intruders who had been causing trouble at the ranch. "They must have somehow learned about this place," Ethan mused, examining marks on the floor that suggested heavy equipment had been moved. But what were they looking for? Guardian's agitated bellowing from above drew their attention. The bull's acute senses had detected something they couldn't yet see or hear. McPherson and Ethan exchanged knowing looks. They weren't alone anymore. Moving quickly but quietly, they made their way back to the entrance. Through the open door, they could hear the sound of vehicles approaching. Guardian stood at the top of the hill, his massive form silhouetted against the afternoon sun, a sentinel protecting not just the ranch, but the heritage of an entire community. The underground chamber had revealed more than just historical artifacts. It had uncovered a legacy of cooperation and survival that defined Willow Creek's true character. The tools and documents preserved within its walls weren't just relics. They were the seeds of wisdom that had helped the community endure through countless challenges. Ethan felt a deep connection to this discovery, understanding now why Guardian had been so protective of this area. The bull hadn't just been guarding physical space. He had been protecting the heart of Willow Creek's history, waiting for the right moment for these secrets to emerge. As they prepared to confront whatever was coming, Ethan realized that the bond between him and Guardian was part of something much larger. A continuation of the community spirit that had built this underground sanctuary generations ago. The mysterious intruders, whoever they were, couldn't understand the true value of what they had found. This wasn't just about preserved tools and historical documents. It was about the unbreakable bonds that held their community together. McPherson placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, his expression resolute. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "we're protecting more than just my ranch. We're protecting our heritage." Above them, Guardian's powerful presence reminded them that some bonds transcend time, connecting past and present in ways that couldn't be measured or explained. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder as Ethan and McPherson emerged from the underground chamber. Guardian stood his ground at the top of the hill, his powerful form a silent warning to any who would threaten the sanctity of this place. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pasture as 3 pickup trucks appeared on the horizon, dust clouds billowing behind them. McPherson quickly mobilized his ranch hands, positioning them strategically around the area. Years of working the land had taught them the value of preparation and patience. Ethan noticed how Guardian seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, moving to stand directly between the approaching vehicles and the entrance to the underground chamber. The trucks came to a stop at the edge of the pasture, and several men stepped out. Their leader, a tall figure in expensive boots and a pressed shirt that spoke more of city boardrooms than ranch work, approached with an air of confidence that seemed out of place in these surroundings. A subtle tension filled the air, like the electricity before a storm. "Mr. McPherson," the man called out, his voice carrying across the field, "I believe we need to have a discussion about your property." He held up what appeared to be old documents. "According to our research, there are valuable historical artifacts buried on this land. We represent a private collection interested in preserving such items." McPherson stepped forward, his weathered face showing no emotion. "This land and everything on it belongs to the community of Willow Creek. It's not for sale and it's not for taking." His voice carried the weight of generations who had worked this land. The man's pleasant demeanor slipped slightly. We are prepared to make a very generous offer. These artifacts deserve to be in a proper museum, don't you think? Somewhere they can be studied and preserved professionally. Ethan moved to stand beside McPherson, Guardian's reassuring presence close behind them. These aren't just artifacts, Ethan spoke up. They're the legacy of this community. The tools and documents down there tell a story of survival and cooperation that belongs to everyone in Willow Creek. The leader's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. Behind him, his companions shifted restlessly, but the presence of Guardian and the determined stance of the ranch hands gave them pause. The massive bull's intelligent eyes seemed to track their every movement. "Listen," the man tried again, his tone becoming more businesslike. "We've been investigating this site for months. We know what's down there. Equipment, documents, photographs, all of it valuable to collectors and historians. Why let it rot underground when it could be properly preserved?" McPherson shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. These things aren't valuable because of what they're worth in dollars. They're valuable because of what they mean to this community. They're not rotting. They're exactly where they belong, teaching us about who we are and where we came from." As if to emphasize the point, Guardian took a step forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow. The movement caused several of the visitors to step back instinctively. The bull's reputation had clearly preceded him, and his protective stance left no doubt about his intentions. The tension in the air was broken by the sound of more vehicles approaching. This time, it was several trucks carrying families from Willow Creek. Word had spread quickly through the small community about the discovery and the threat to their heritage. Farmers, ranchers, and townspeople arrived, standing quietly but firmly, with McPherson and his ranch hands. The leader of the collectors looked around, taking in the growing crowd of determined faces. These weren't just random people. They were the descendants of those who had built the underground chamber, who had worked together to preserve their way of life during the hardest of times. Guardian moved closer to Ethan, and in that moment, something profound became clear to everyone present. The bull wasn't just protecting a physical space. He was protecting the very spirit of Willow Creek. His connection with Ethan, their unique bond, was a living example of the community's values: trust, loyalty, and the deep connection between the land and its people. The afternoon light painted everything in golden hues as the standoff continued, each side weighing their options. But with every passing moment, as more community members arrived to stand with McPherson, the balance of power shifted. These weren't just random artifacts to be bought and sold. This was living history, and its guardians were prepared to protect it at all costs. The gathering crowd at McPherson's ranch had transformed the quiet afternoon into something extraordinary. Pickup trucks lined the dirt road leading to the pasture, and familiar faces from every corner of Willow Creek stood together, their presence a testament to the power of community. Old rivalries and petty disagreements were forgotten in the face of this threat to their shared heritage. Among the newcomers was Sarah Thompson, the town's librarian and local historian. She stepped forward, clutching a leather-bound volume to her chest. "I've been documenting Willow Creek's history for 30 years, she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "What you're trying to take isn't just a collection of old tools and papers. It's the story of our survival, our unity, and our strength." The leader of the collectors shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for this show of communal solidarity. His companions exchanged uncertain glances as Guardian maintained his vigilant stance, the bull's presence a powerful symbol of protection that seemed to embody the spirit of the moment. Emily Martinez, whose grandparents had been among the original families who built the underground storage, spoke next. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about how everyone came together during the hard times. They shared what little they had, worked together, supported each other. That's what these artifacts represent, not just survival, but the power of standing together." Ethan watched as more stories emerged from the crowd. Each person who stepped forward added another thread to the tapestry of Willow Creek's history. Old Tom Henderson, his voice wavering with emotion, recalled how his father had helped design the ventilation system for the underground chamber. Mary Wilson shared how her mother's preserved seed collection, stored in those underground rooms, had helped restart many farms after a devastating drought. McPherson moved to stand beside Guardian, placing a weathered hand on the bull's broad shoulder. "This land, these artifacts, they belong to all of us," he declared. "They're not just pieces of the past. They're reminders of who we are and what we can accomplish when we work together." The collector's leader cleared his throat, his previous confidence notably diminished. "Perhaps we've approached this situation incorrectly," he admitted. "We didn't understand the significance of these artifacts to your community." "No, you didn't," Ethan stepped forward, Guardian moving with him like a shadow. "These aren't just items to be bought and sold. They're part of a living legacy. Every tool, every document, every photograph down there tells a story of how this community survived by supporting each other." The afternoon light softened as Sarah Thompson opened her history book, showing yellowed photographs of the original construction of the underground chamber. "Look at these faces," she urged, turning the pages carefully. These were people who understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the bonds we share with each other. Guardian's powerful presence seemed to underscore every word as more community members shared their connections to the hidden chamber and its contents. The bull stood watchful, his intelligent eyes moving between the collectors and the growing crowd of townspeople, as if understanding the importance of this moment. The collector's leader looked around at the united front before him. Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers, teachers, all standing together, their resolve unshakable. His expensive boots were covered in prairie dust, and his crisp shirt had wilted in the Montana sun. Whatever he had expected to find in Willow Creek, it clearly wasn't this. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, a transformation seemed to take place. The tension in the air gradually shifted into something else, a sense of pride, of belonging, of community strength. Guardian remained at Ethan's side, their unique bond a living symbol of the connections that made Willow Creek special. The underground chamber, with its carefully preserved tools and documents, had done more than just protect physical artifacts. It had become a catalyst for bringing the community together once again, reminding everyone of the values and bonds that had helped their ancestors survive the hardest of times. As Ethan looked around at the faces of his neighbors, he realized that Guardian hadn't just been protecting the physical space. He had been protecting this moment, this reunion of hearts and minds, this reaffirmation of what made Willow Creek truly special. In the days following the confrontation, the underground chamber became a hub of activity, unlike anything Willow Creek had seen in years. The collectors had departed, leaving behind a community energized by their shared victory and united by a common purpose. McPherson, inspired by the outpouring of support, had proposed transforming the underground space into something that would benefit everyone. A living museum that would tell the story of their community's resilience. The transformation began with careful planning. Sarah Thompson, the town librarian, took charge of cataloging every item, while local craftsmen volunteered to restore the chamber's infrastructure. The original timber supports were reinforced, and a proper lighting system was installed, illuminating decades of history that had waited patiently in the darkness. Guardian maintained his vigilant presence throughout the renovation, watching over the proceedings with his characteristic intelligence. The massive bull had become something of a local celebrity, with people traveling from neighboring towns just to catch a glimpse of the animal who had helped protect their heritage. His special bond with Ethan continued to amaze visitors, as the bull responded to unspoken cues and seemed to understand exactly what was needed in any situation. "It's remarkable," Sarah commented one afternoon, as she watched Guardian help guide a group of workers moving heavy equipment. "It's almost as if he understands the importance of what we're doing here." She was organizing a display of photographs that showed the original construction of the underground chamber, carefully preserved memories of a community coming together in hard times. Ethan, who had extended his stay in Willow Creek indefinitely, worked alongside the volunteers. His experience in agricultural consulting proved invaluable as they developed plans to maintain the delicate balance between preservation and accessibility. The underground chamber needed to remain stable while allowing visitors to experience its historical significance. The most touching moments came when elderly community members visited during the renovation. They would walk through the space, tears in their eyes, pointing out tools their parents had used or sharing stories passed down through generations. Each visit added another layer to the rich tapestry of Willow Creek's history, and Ethan made sure every story was recorded and preserved. McPherson himself seemed rejuvenated by the project. He spent hours working alongside everyone else, sharing his own family stories and helping to ensure that the space would honor the spirit of those who had built it. "My grandfather would be proud," he said one evening, watching the sunset paint the prairie in golden hues. "Not just of preserving the past, but of how the community has come together again." The underground chamber's transformation revealed hidden treasures beyond the tools and documents. Behind a previously undiscovered panel, they found a collection of handwritten journals describing traditional farming techniques that had helped the community survive during the Dust Bowl era. These precious records would now be preserved and shared with future generations. Guardian's role evolved as the work progressed. The bull seemed to understand that his duty was no longer just to protect, but to welcome. He developed an uncanny ability to sense when visitors were approaching, positioning himself near the entrance like a living welcome sign. Children especially were drawn to him, and under Ethan's watchful eye, the gentle giant became an ambassador for the living museum. As word spread about Willow Creek's unique project, agricultural historians and community organizers from across the state began to visit. They came to study not just the historical artifacts, but the way the town had united to preserve and share their heritage. The underground chamber was becoming more than just a museum. It was a symbol of how rural communities could honor their past while building for the future. Local schools arranged field trips, and Ethan often found himself sharing the story of Guardian and the discovery of the chamber with wide-eyed students. The bull would stand nearby, patient and attentive, as if understanding the importance of passing these stories on to the next generation. Each visit helped strengthen the bonds between the past and present, between the land and its people. The renovation project had another unexpected effect. It began healing old wounds in the community. Families who had barely spoken to each other in years found themselves working side by side, sharing stories and rediscovering their common ground. The spirit of cooperation that had helped their ancestors survive was being reborn in a new context. As autumn painted the Montana landscape in rich golds and deep reds, the impact of the underground museum on Willow Creek became increasingly evident. The small town was experiencing a renaissance of sorts, with the preservation of its history sparking new life in unexpected ways. The museum had become more than just a collection of artifacts. It was a living, breathing testament to the enduring spirit of the community. Ethan had officially taken a leave of absence from his job in Billings, finding himself drawn deeper into the project that had started with Guardian's mysterious behavior. His corporate office seemed a distant memory now, replaced by the rich tapestry of community life that he had rediscovered. The connection he shared with Guardian had only grown stronger, as if their bond was meant to bridge the past and present of Willow Creek. The museum itself had evolved beyond anyone's expectations. Local artisans had crafted beautiful display cases that protected the historical documents while making them accessible to visitors. The original timber supports had been carefully preserved, their weathered surfaces telling stories of their own. Solar-powered lighting illuminated the space, respecting both history and modern environmental concerns. Guardian had become an integral part of the museum experience. The massive bull seemed to understand his role perfectly, greeting visitors with a gentle demeanor that belied his impressive size. Children would often arrive nervous but leave enchanted, having heard the story of how Guardian had helped protect the town's heritage. His presence added a living dimension to the historical exhibits, a bridge between past and present that visitors found captivating. Sarah Thompson had organized a series of community gatherings in the restored space, where older residents shared their memories while younger ones recorded them for posterity. During one such evening, old Tom Henderson's granddaughter discovered that her grandfather had helped build the original ventilation system, a fact that had nearly been lost to time. The pride in Tom's eyes as he explained the ingenious design to his enthralled granddaughter captured the essence of what the museum represented. McPherson, watching the transformation of his property, had begun incorporating the museum into his regular ranch operations. School groups would visit to learn not just about history, but about modern, sustainable farming practices. The connection between past and present became clearer with each visit, as students saw how traditional wisdom could inform current challenges. One particularly moving moment came when a group of agricultural students from Montana State University visited. They were amazed by the preserved farming techniques documented in the old journals, finding solutions to modern problems in the wisdom of previous generations. Guardian stood watch as they studied the documents, his presence a reminder of the enduring connection between the land and its caretakers. The museum had also begun attracting attention from other rural communities facing similar challenges. Representatives from small towns across Montana came to learn how Willow Creek had preserved its heritage while strengthening its community bonds. Each visit reinforced the importance of what they had created, not just a museum, but a model for rural preservation and renewal. Ethan found himself sharing the story of Guardian and the discovery of the underground chamber countless times. But it never grew old. Each telling seemed to reveal new layers of meaning, new connections between the past and present. The bull would often stand nearby during these narrations, his intelligent eyes seeming to follow the story, adding his silent testimony to the tale. Local artists had begun creating works inspired by the museum and its stories. A series of paintings depicting Guardian as the protector of Willow Creek's heritage now hung in the town hall. Children wrote essays and poems about the bull and the underground chamber, their young imaginations captured by the magic of their town's history. The museum had become more than just a tourist attraction. It was a catalyst for community engagement. Regular workshops taught traditional crafts and farming techniques, while study groups discussed how to apply historical wisdom to contemporary challenges. The underground space that had once protected tools and documents now protected something even more valuable: the living heritage of a community. Guardian's role had evolved as well. While he still maintained his watchful presence, he had become a symbol of the connection between generations. Young and old alike would stop to greet him, and he responded with an almost human-like understanding. His special bond with Ethan seemed to represent the bridge between urban and rural life, past and present, tradition and progress. As winter approached, bringing crisp mornings and frost-covered fields to Willow Creek, Ethan found himself at a crossroads. His leave of absence from the consulting firm in Billings was nearing its end, and decisions needed to be made. The corporate world he had once embraced now seemed distant and somehow less meaningful compared to the rich tapestry of life he had rediscovered in his hometown. One morning, As he watched Guardian moving through the misty fields, Ethan reflected on the changes the past months had brought. The underground museum had become a thriving center of community life, far exceeding anyone's expectations. But more than that, he had rediscovered a part of himself that had been lost in the rush of city life, a connection to the land and its people that ran deeper than any corporate success could match. His phone buzzed with another message from his boss in Billings asking about his return date. The prestigious firm was offering him a promotion, a corner office with a view of the city skyline, and a substantial raise. Once, these things would have seemed like the perfect culmination of his career goals. Now they felt hollow compared to the satisfaction of working alongside his neighbors to preserve their shared heritage. "You've got that look again," McPherson observed, joining Ethan at the fence. The old rancher had become more than just an employer. He had become a mentor and friend. "The one where you're trying to decide between two paths." Guardian approached them, his breath visible in the cool morning air. The bull's presence had a way of bringing clarity to difficult moments, as if his steadfast nature helped put things in perspective. Ethan reached out to scratch behind the animal's ears, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "The museum needs someone to manage it properly," McPherson continued, his voice casual, but his words carefully chosen. "Someone who understands both the old ways and the new. Someone who can bridge the gap between preservation and progress." The suggestion hung in the air like the morning mist. Ethan looked across the fields where he had played as a child, now transformed into something that honored both past and present. The museum had become more than just a collection of artifacts. It was a living entity that needed nurturing and guidance to continue growing. Sarah Thompson had been saying something similar during their recent meetings about the museum's future. With her background in historical preservation and his experience in agricultural consulting, they had been developing plans for educational programs that would connect traditional farming wisdom with modern, sustainable practices. Guardian nudged Ethan's shoulder gently, drawing his attention to a group of visitors approaching the museum entrance. It was a family from Iowa who had read about Willow Creek's unique preservation project in a farming magazine. The father carried a notebook, eager to learn about traditional techniques that might help with his own farm's challenges. Watching the family's excitement as they discovered the treasures preserved underground, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The corporate world had taught him valuable skills, but here was an opportunity to use those skills for something more meaningful, helping preserve and share the wisdom of generations while building a bridge to the future. Later that afternoon, as he sat in the restored underground chamber, reviewing some of the recently discovered documents, Ethan noticed how the space had evolved. What had once been simply a storage area was now alive with possibility. The carefully preserved tools and journals weren't just relics of the past, they were teaching tools for the future. A group of local teenagers had started an after-school program at the museum, learning traditional crafts and farming techniques from community elders. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and their questions often led to discoveries that even the oldest residents hadn't considered. They represented the future of Willow Creek, a future that needed guidance and connection to its roots. Guardian's gentle lowing echoed from above, a familiar sound that had become part of the museum's daily rhythm. The bull's intuitive understanding of people and his protective nature had made him an integral part of the experience, drawing visitors from far and wide who came as much to see him as the historical exhibits. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and purple, Ethan walked with Guardian through the fields where their story had begun. The decision he faced wasn't just about career choices, it was about choosing the kind of life he wanted to lead and the legacy he wanted to help create. The decision, when it finally came, felt less like a choice and more like an acknowledgement of what Ethan had known all along. Standing in his Billings apartment, surrounded by carefully packed boxes, he composed his official resignation letter to the consulting firm. The words flowed easily, explaining his decision to return to Willow Creek permanently to manage the community museum and develop educational programs that would bridge traditional farming wisdom with modern sustainable practices. His colleagues in the city were surprised but supportive, many expressing admiration for his choice to pursue something so meaningful. His boss, after a long pause, had simply said, "Sometimes the most valuable consulting work isn't done from a corner office." The comment stayed with Ethan as he made his final preparations to leave city life behind. Back in Willow Creek, the news of Ethan's decision spread quickly, generating excitement and new ideas among the community members. Sarah Thompson immediately began working with him to expand the museum's educational programs, while McPherson offered him a permanent position overseeing both the museum and a section of the ranch dedicated to demonstrating traditional farming techniques. Guardian seemed to sense the change in Ethan's status, showing even more attentiveness than usual. The bull's behavior continued to amaze visitors, as he instinctively knew which groups needed a gentle approach and which were ready for a more impressive display of his presence. His connection with Ethan had become something of a legend, drawing researchers interested in studying animal behavior and the unique bonds that can form between humans and animals. The museum itself was evolving in exciting ways. A grant from a state agricultural foundation would allow them to expand the underground space, creating dedicated areas for workshops and demonstrations. Local craftsmen were already planning how to maintain the historical integrity of the structure, while incorporating modern amenities that would make it more accessible to visitors. One morning, as Ethan walked the property with Guardian by his side, he encountered a young family touring the museum. Their 10-year-old daughter was completely captivated by Guardian, showing no fear of the massive bull as she asked question after question about his role in discovering the underground chamber. Her parents explained they were considering moving to Willow Creek, drawn by the strong sense of community and connection to history they had experienced during their visit. The underground chamber that had once stored tools and documents was now nurturing something even more valuable: hope for the future of rural communities. Other towns began sending representatives to learn from Willow Creek's example, seeing how preserving their heritage could help build a bridge to the future rather than just memorializing the past. Sarah's historical research had uncovered more stories about the original construction of the underground chamber, revealing how the community had come together during those difficult times. These stories now served as inspiration for new cooperative efforts among the residents of Willow Creek, from shared equipment programs to community seed banks that honored traditional agricultural practices. Guardian's presence continued to be a crucial part of the museum experience. The bull had an almost supernatural ability to appear at just the right moment, whether greeting excited schoolchildren or calming nervous visitors. His special bond with Ethan seemed to deepen with each passing day, as if their connection was a living example of the bridge between past and present that the museum represented. The transformation in Ethan's life had ripple effects throughout the community. Young people who had been planning to leave Willow Creek began to see possibilities for combining traditional wisdom with modern innovations. The museum became a gathering place for discussions about sustainable agriculture, historical preservation, and community development. One evening, as the sun set over the prairie, Ethan sat with McPherson on the old porch, Guardian grazing peacefully nearby. The older man looked at the young person Ethan had become, someone who had found his purpose by returning to his roots while bringing new perspectives to old traditions. "You know," McPherson said thoughtfully, "when my grandfather helped build that underground chamber, he wasn't just thinking about storing tools and supplies. He was thinking about preserving something more important: the knowledge and spirit that made this community strong. Looks like Guardian knew exactly what he was protecting all along. Spring returned to Willow Creek, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility that seemed to echo through the Montana plains. 1 year had passed since Ethan's decision to make his hometown his permanent residence, and the changes in both the community and himself were profound. The underground museum had become a beacon of hope for rural communities across the state, demonstrating how honoring the past could light the way to the future. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dew-covered grass as Ethan and Guardian made their daily inspection of the museum grounds. The bull, impressive as ever, moved with the same grace and purpose that had first captured Ethan's attention years ago. Their bond had become a living symbol of the connection between generations, between tradition and progress, between the land and its people. Today was special. The museum was hosting its first annual Heritage Festival, celebrating the anniversary of its discovery and transformation. Families from across Montana and neighboring states had gathered to share stories, learn traditional skills, and experience the unique spirit of Willow Creek. The underground chamber, once a secret storage space, now hummed with life and purpose. Guardian had his own role to play in the festivities. The bull seemed to understand the importance of the occasion, positioning himself near the museum entrance where he could greet visitors with his characteristic gentle demeanor. Children gathered around him, listening wide-eyed as their parents recounted the story of how he had helped protect and reveal the chamber's existence. Sarah Thompson had organized an exhibition of newly discovered photographs and documents, each one adding another layer to the rich tapestry of Willow Creek's history. Among them was a faded photograph of the original construction of the underground chamber, showing faces filled with determination and hope despite the hardships they faced. Beside it, a new photograph showed current community members working together to preserve and expand the space, their expressions reflecting the same spirit of cooperation and resilience. The festival brought together all aspects of the community's transformation. Local artisans demonstrated traditional crafts in spaces where farm equipment had once been stored. Agricultural students from state universities presented research projects that combined historical farming techniques with modern sustainable practices. In every corner of the underground chamber, the past and present danced together in perfect harmony. McPherson, watching the proceedings with obvious pride, shared stories with visitors about how the museum had changed the fabric of life in Willow Creek. Young families had moved to the area, drawn by the strong sense of community and the opportunity to be part of something meaningful. The town's population had grown for the first time in decades, bringing new energy while maintaining its connection to its roots. Guardian's presence throughout the day seemed to embody the spirit of the celebration. The bull moved through the crowd with remarkable awareness, gentling his movements around small children and the elderly, standing tall and impressive for photographs, always maintaining his protective watch over the space he had helped discover. His connection with Ethan remained as strong as ever, their synchronized movements a testament to the deep understanding they shared. As evening approached, the community gathered for a special ceremony. Ethan, standing beside Guardian, looked out over the faces of his neighbors, faces that showed the perfect blend of determination that had built the underground chamber and the hope that was now transforming it. The museum had become more than just a preservation of the past. It was a living, breathing entity that continued to grow and evolve with each passing day. The legacy of Ethan and Guardian's discovery had extended far beyond the physical space of the underground chamber. It had become a model for other rural communities seeking to preserve their heritage while building for the future. Visitors from across the country came to learn not just about historical artifacts, but about the power of community bonds and the importance of maintaining connections to the land and its traditions. As the sun set over the Montana plains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and purple, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. What had started with a mysterious sound and a brave bull had transformed not just a space or a community, but the very way people thought about preserving their heritage. The underground chamber was no longer just a repository of tools and documents. It was a living testament to the enduring spirit of rural America. Guardians stood beside him, their silhouettes merging with the dying light, two guardians of a legacy that would continue to inspire and transform lives for generations to come. Their story had become part of the very fabric of Willow Creek, a reminder that the strongest connections aren't just those we forge with the past, but those we build with each other, day by day, choice by choice, always moving forward while honoring what came before. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ethan and Guardian has touched your hearts and reminded you of the power of community, tradition, and the special bonds we share with both animals and our heritage. If you've been moved by this tale of discovery, preservation, and renewal, we invite you to join our growing family of storytelling enthusiasts. Click the subscribe button to your left to receive more heartwarming stories that celebrate the enduring spirit of rural America. Don't forget to leave a like and share your own stories of community and connection in the comments below. Every week, we bring you new tales that remind us of the importance of preserving our heritage while building for the future. Join us on this journey of discovery, one story at a time. Remember, like Guardian watching over Willow Creek's treasures, we're here every day, protecting and sharing the stories that matter most.